Greetings, fellow makers. I want to share a quick tip with you that saved a project of mine, and I want to give proper credit here. So the person who helped me with this project, with just 5 or 10 minutes of his time, just explaining to me just a slight difference in where you put your clay wall when you make the mold. Wow, I mean, he really made it possible for me to make these hands at this relaxed finger position. So his name is Tom Kuebler. Check out his work. I'll leave a link in the description just so you can see how brilliant what he does is. He specializes in things that are creepy, bizarre, but hyper realistic. So if you're into that whole circus freak, horror movie, dark fantasy type of thing, that guy, has got it covered. And he actually is one of the few that still sells his pieces individually once he makes them sometimes. So shrunken heads, gumball machines, things like that for surprisingly affordable prices. So check them out. Someday I'd like to have one of his pieces when I have a space to display other people's work. I don't even display much of my work on the walls because I don't have walls anymore. I have shelves. That's what you get for living in a small space and working in there too. Anyways, check out his work. Thomas Kuebler, thank you very much for your advice on the clay wall. So what it is that the fingers are resting, they're more relaxed, so that creates a curve, that creates an undercut here. My mold had to be plaster. I could not make a silicone mold for this because the end result, this is creature cast rubber, which is a neoprene, and it needs a plaster mold to absorb the moisture to form the thick skin that you need for the final product. So in that case, you need 2 hard shells of plaster meeting perfectly. So that creates a problem because nothing is flexible in your mold, and you can either break your mold when you remove the clay from it if you're not careful, or you can break your copies when you're finally using the mold. You could break the mold itself. It's catastrophic when you don't do it right. So it's a lot less forgiving than silicone molds. I've been making silicone molds for over a decade now, and I kind of forgot how to make plaster molds to fit properly. So I asked Tom because I was really stuck. I couldn't figure it out, but I knew for sure I had a problem. I have a good sense of, an overwhelming sense of upcoming mistakes from years and years of learning what not to do. So I contacted a few colleagues, and the one that had the most clear information for my beginner self was Tom Kuebler, and he said, move your clay wall above the fingernails so that, I was actually, my original clay wall was underneath the fingernails, in the fleshy part of the fingers, again, to try to preserve the details for the fingernails. But he said, to simplify the shape, you need to move that clay wall above it. And he was right. I actually went a little bit deeper than he said because I figured, the shape I had, because of the curvature of it, I needed to simplify it a little bit more. So the upper part is a much simpler shape inside the mold now, and it pops right out, no problem. The inside is a bit more tricky because these fingers dig into the plaster. These tips here, this whole section here is curving inward inside of the plaster mold. So because of that separation, it simplifies both things, in a lot. It's still at the limit of what the plaster can do, I think. But my goodness, it is such a... And I'm not really good at making clay walls, so I have a lot of cleanup to do. But that's nothing compared to how I would have ruined the job of days and days of sculpting and smoothing my monster clay, because this is what the hand looks like when you pry it off of the mold when the hand is still a bit hot from the chemical reaction of the curing of the plaster. Especially ultracal, it heats up a lot, so your clay becomes relatively soft. So you might want to, wait a tiny bit of time before you start peeling it off because the clay is still a bit sticky. So anyways, that's what they look like when you rip them out of the mold. So it's ruined. You can't really, expect to fix it quickly and do another mold. It would be another 2 or 3 days of work to fix it. So you don't want to risk it. So that's why I asked some advice, and Tom, was kind enough to take a few minutes of his time to explain it to me by text, and I understood, which is rare. I need pictures or videos usually, but he was so clear that I was able to make it happen, and I'm really, really glad because these hands now fit with this face, and they're realistic enough for the project. So thank you for watching, and share this tip with people, because again, we need that sort of thing in the field of puppetry, because I see too many hands that are just inferior especially compared to the faces. I mean, I understand in style that you might want some simpler hands like mittens for some projects, but don't use that as an excuse, especially when you have a more realistic or a more specifically well sculpted head and you have much simpler hands because you can't manage to sculpt them better or mold them better. So this might be a step in the right direction for a lot of us, because I was about to give up. Like, this is, I can't do it. I'm gonna rip it out. I'm gonna destroy those hands that I spent so much time on. I really didn't want to have to open the fingers and change the position, because these were well calculated to be slightly different from each other to make the character look more alive and natural. I didn't want to sacrifice that, so I was just about to do that. I was just about to reopen the fingers and having to re-smooth and re-detail everything after the modification. So yeah, I'm really glad that he took the time to answer me at such a short notice and give me that tip that I could not find anywhere, because I spent hours online trying to find a mold making solution, but nothing specific enough for me to understand. So I'm hoping that this will help some of you. And again, the credit goes to the techniques of Thomas Kuebler. Check out his work. Fantastic, hyper-realistic, creepy stuff. And you can also get some of his products at really reasonable prices when he sells them on his, I think, Etsy store. Check it out. I'll leave a link. Thank you very much.